Hi, and welcome back to another Brutus Monroe Design Team project. Today I'm using the Spooky Kids again. I'm going to jump right into the project. The Spooky Kids is right there on the screen, and I'm also going to be using the Victorian Swirl Slimline Stencil. I have a piece of Canson XL watercolor paper. I did cut it to 4x9 because I really wasn't sure what size slimline I wanted to create today. A lot of times when I'm creating, I do create on the fly. I knew that I wanted to use the Brutus Monroe media paste. I wanted to get a little bit of that texture and that depth to this panel. And then once I finish spreading it evenly over this beautiful Victorian Swirl stencil, I will lift it up, and then we're going to add some of the sterling embossing powder over the top. I did make sure to clean off my stencil and my tool that I used to spread it over in the sink right after I put this embossing powder on. So I let that embossing powder dry over the texture paste for about an hour, and now I'm using my Wagner heat tool and I'm heating it up. So it's not going to make the texture paste bubble because the texture paste is already dry, and I am going to get that beautiful embossing, which is going to resist the Chroma mist that I'm using. I'm using two colors of Chroma mist. I'm using, I can't remember the full name, but I know that it's Lilac, which is going to be that purple, and then the Cobalt blue. I thought that I would lay it on my media mat, but I really didn't get the absorption into this cardstock when I spray it with the water and swipe it because of that embossing on there and that texture paste. So I went to plan B and I went ahead and I started spraying it. So I'm going to be pretty heavy-handed with the spray. I do end up getting some spots that are a little more concentrated. That lilac right there on the bottom left is a little bit heavy. So I'm going to add some more water to get a little bit more movement right after I dry this. So I used my Ranger heat tool because it's not going to remelt my embossing powder. And I'm going to dry the panel off. And then I'm going to add some more water to try to get some of that to move. I didn't want to use my paintbrush to move it because I didn't want to get any pilling of the paper since I am using a very inexpensive paper. And once I do that, I decide that I want a little more depth. And so I add a little bit more of both of the Cobalt blue and the Lilac sprays and set it aside to dry. I'm going to start doing some coloring. I did stamp my image onto a piece of Brutus Monroe media paper that is friendly for Copic markers, and I used the Raven ink, and I'm doing some Copic coloring with my neutral colors. So I believe I started with my darkest, which was an N9. I blended it out with an N7, and then in the white space I used my N5, and I'm going to do it all over again. And I love the way that the Copic markers blend on this Brutus Monroe paper. If you're looking for a Copic friendly paper that blends nicely, I would highly recommend this paper. I think that I really get a beautiful blend with it. I'm going to finish off the tip of her hat, and then I'm going to move on to her little gown. For her gown, I'm going to use V markers. So since I had that lilac in the background of my panel, I thought that I would add more purple, kind of a purplish blue, and so I started with the, I believe it's a V23. All the caps are on the screen, and I blended that out with my mid-tone, and then I used that white space to add my lightest color, and I'm going to do it all over again. And finally, I'm going to share the coloring of her skin. So my favorite skin tones for a Caucasian is going to be an E11, which is going to be my darkest color. That darkest color is going to go around the edges of her face where her hair is hanging over her bangs. And then I'm going to blend that out with an E1. And once I blend that out, I then go back over it with my E11 and do the E1 again. And finally, in the white space that I leave, I do add the E00, I believe. For her cheeks, I ended up using an R31. And then I do come in off camera and use a white gel pen to give her some freckles. And I also color her little tooth. And then I colored her tongue with that R31 as well. I'm going to do the same thing for her hat, for her hands and her legs. I'm going to use a green marker to color in her eyes. And then I do use my brother's Scan and Cut to cut out the image. Now, one of the things that Brutus Monroe did with this release is all of the stamp sets do have coordinating dies, so the coordinating dies are available. I just did not happen to have them. As you can see, I did cut out a label right there to the left. I thought I was going to go with white, but then I decided that I wanted to bring in a little bit more of that purple. So this is a label from Pink Fresh Studio. If it's available, I know Brutus Monroe carries Pink Fresh. I'm not sure if this particular set's available, but if it is, I'll link it in the description box below. And I used the Brutus Monroe Embossing Ink, and I'm going to use the Sterling embossing powder one more time, and I am going to heat set the sentiment that says it's just a bunch of hocus pocus, and I love that, especially for this little witch. I did cut out my panel. I went with a mini slimline. My finished mini slimline is going to be roughly roughly 3 by 6. So I'm blending the edges of it with Blueprint Sketch. And I did cut the panel out using a die from my stash. So that scallop die was just one that I had in my stash. I'm going to center it onto my card base. And I love the way that Blueprint Sketch really works nicely with that cobalt blue Chroma mist. I'm going to add some tape, some foam tape to the back of my label, because you do know that I love dimension. And then I'm going to place it on my card panel, and then I'm going to use an action wobbler. So I thought this little witch needed a little bit of movement, and I added an action wobbler to the back of her. She doesn't stick perfectly at first, so you're going to see that I'm going to try to show you the movement of the action wobbler, and she's going to fly right off. So this little witch had some movement of her own. Once I get it adhered back down, I set it aside for a while, and it works just fine. I'm going to show you a close-up of my project, and that's all that I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for watching.